But before we do that, we have to talk about one of the players who does have COVID, but that doesn't seem to be a big issue with him at the moment.
Right.
I feel like we've had the Dembele talk 1 billion times since this podcast started. And actually, I'm not that far off. Frances and I talked about what Dembele could bring to Barca way back in episode 27. I looked this up back in August of 2017 when he signed with the club.
Wow.
And I feel like, having listened to part of that, we have not gotten much farther in the conversation, because a lot of that conversation was theoretical and about what he can do and what he's capable of and what he needs to improve upon. And he is very much the same player, just 5 years down the line. And I guess a little more refined and a little more guaranteed in what he is, because he is 5 years down the line. And the reason we talk about him, obviously, if you listen to this podcast, you don't live under a rock, you know, the contract talks apparently have broken down. Maybe we won't be having this conversation much longer. I must say that too. So I just want to quickly go over, Emile, let's start with what we are now being told at time of reporting. So Gerard Romero is at the center of this. He's a Catalan journalist turned Twitch personality. And he has, for the last few seasons, has a very hit or miss record. Let's put it that way. Yeah. But it seems like under Laporta board, and we'll get to him again with Morata, that Romero has regained, because again, some kind of relationship with whoever's in Laporta's board or his entorno, as they say, that Romero has regained some of his credibility. So he reported yesterday that Dembele's agent was told that Barca could not meet his salary demands, and his agent said that he was only willing to accept those conditions. So that we know is true. That's been confirmed by every journalist everywhere, in Catalonia and beyond. So here's the allegedly parts of that story that seem to be dictating people's opinions and creating discourse here. And that is, one, that his agent is using the Ferran Torres signing and his necessary registration being dependent on Dembele's renewal, as in Dembele has to renew, or this renewal they wanted to get done now so that he would lower his salary to get Ferran Torres registered. So the agent is using that as leverage. That seems very plausible to me. Number two is that his camp is frustrated. The club is saying they don't have enough money for Dembele, but they do want to sign Haaland. And that is abundantly clear, even in those meetings and the project moving forward. And then number three is that the agent and Dembele are asking for a 40 million euro gross per season salary and a 20 million euro signing bonus, which comes out to about 750K per week. How much validity do you give to those three?
So the first two, I would say relatively high. I mean, I guess they sort of dovetail into one another. So it's Ferran Torres, you guys, after all this time of all this talk of austerity and, there's no money and everything else. So you guys find the money and splash out for Ferran Torres. And all the while, even in these moments where there was apparently no money, the hope of bringing Erling Haaland here was, never abandoned. And I suppose, why would you abandon it? That would be a great thing if you could do it. But the fact that it's still being spoken about as such a feasible option, I get from his perspective where he might say that, okay, so you guys want me to take a pay cut effectively to finance the acquisition of my replacements, or, the guys that you're going to almost instantaneously promote above me. I understand where he might be a little bit put out by that, and just say that, so you guys clearly can find this money somewhere. You just don't want to give it to me. So I kind of get that. The last one, about his salary demands, the 40 million and that sounds outlandish. I mean, that kind of smacks of, if anything, that kind of tells me that, and again, I know nothing, I have no inside information, but it gives me the impression that this thing might really be dead in the water. And it strikes me as, sometimes when a guy is out the door, the local media or the local friendly media will start planting stories, and, stories will come out about either, bad behavior in the past or demands that were made that precipitated the exit. So this strikes me as a lot of that. I mean, that strikes me as like PR wrangling. So the third one doesn't really get me too much. The first two seem eminently plausible.
Well, the only thing about the third one that I do raise an eyebrow as is that it was reported the two clubs connected to him immediately, even as soon as January, if he were to get some kind of release from Barca now, is Manchester United and Newcastle. And in the case of Newcastle over the summer, the 40 million gross salary and 20 million signing bonus might not be something that the Moussa Sissoko, the agent for Dembele, believes is plausible for Barca, but that might be the counter offer from Newcastle for the summertime that the agent is bringing to the table. And basically saying, hey, if you guys can't deliver the bag to my client, then he's going to go get that bag elsewhere. And he's completely entitled to do that. And I always tell every player, I mean, as much as people are popping up with the meme of, not meme, but the quote by Johan Cruyff about if you don't want to be at Barca, then, Barca doesn't want you. And Xavi has iterated the same thing in his time. Barca could go out and use that money, not only to register in the short term, obviously, but they could use that money on Ronald Araujo and Nico and Gabi. It's just unfortunate that Barca does not have the leverage where they either, I mean, he cannot be an asset. Apparently, the club is saying to Xavi that, and this is a big decision that Xavi has to make. Again, somebody who said before that he doesn't want someone who doesn't want to play at the club, right? And he said that, and Xavi has said that. But, I don't lose sight of the most important thing this season being finishing top four. So what does Barca have to do to finish top four? And it seems like, I mean, is he willing to go for 10 million euros? Probably not. He's going to probably refuse to be sold for 10 million. And that's the likely the case.
Well, that was the prevailing rumor anyway, just when the negotiations were ongoing, right? It was either there's going to be an extension and he's going to be here beyond this year, or he's just going to wind down his contract and go for free because that's going to secure him the largest pay packet.
And with his injury history, he was only willing. They weren't really. I mean, again, you and I cover the NBA, so you see a lot more with the player autonomy there. This is not there was no put up or shut up deal on the table. There was no 1 year or 2 year extension for Dembele. His agent wanted a long-term solution, which tells you the agent may not be totally sold on the player either. And with his health and track record, you can't be, as he's entering his prime. You can't be sold.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so I think for Xavi, it's fair for him to be divided. I mean, again, so Barca could use some of that flat money other than register, but for Araujo and Nico and Gabi and those extensions, which are, I think, more important than Dembele's even. But again, I think it's a division. It seems like people with one voice are saying that Dembele, all right, like, how do you get him out of the club now that he's like denied the renewal? Like, it's over, right? It's done. Yeah. But I think it stinks. I think it stinks that Xavi is losing one of the potentially most influential wingers of world football when he played for the club. And for the club to lose another asset for free is tough. But in the end, it may be best for all parties involved to move on from this situation and maybe move on as soon as possible. Other than the leverage that Dembele has, I mean, for Barca's sake, at least. I mean, Barca won't be trapped in a big contract for a player that has missed more time than he's played, and is still a question mark durability-wise entering his prime. And to me, I do throw out that if you don't care about the club, this is still a business, and Dembele's agent is right to ask for the moon when Dembele is willing to get the moon, or is able to get the moon from Newcastle. Because if Newcastle is willing to pay for theory, and that's what the difference of these negotiations is, that Newcastle, if they put him on 40 million gross per season, they're paying for, in theory, a really, really great player who's a World Cup winner, and it could be this world-class winger. But the agent is negotiating the theory, and the club is negotiating reality, plus their financial reality.
The proven track record. And I mean, the club is also negotiating its own reality.
Exactly.
I mean, they're negotiating Dembele's reality along with their own. Now,
I'm missed 104 matches. That's reality. I mean, that is reality for Barca to come to the table with.
I mean, that's the thing. It's, when you were talking about when you were, kind of introducing the subject, you were talking about how he's a little bit of an involved player. He's a little bit more of a refined player and everything else. And I think there's some truth to that. But at the same time, too, I mean, there's so little, I don't know, like concrete data and concrete track record to grab. And especially of a continuous run of play where he's been healthy, where we can legitimately kind of pin down what he is and where he fits and, different ways that he's been deployed and where they might be better. There just hasn't, and I mean, we've gotten some data points, but there just hasn't been a long run of sustained, healthy, high level play where we can have a whole lot of confidence saying that this is what this guy is now. His physical attributes and his skills are known and they are considerable, but we don't actually know what is the proven entity of the player?
Well, I think unfortunately the proven entity of the player is good enough to. I mean, that's the question that I'm going to ask you as well. I've been thinking about the question, and you see Twitter polls too. Like, should Barcelona and Xavi, if the club wants him to sit in the stands if he's leaving for free and don't utilize that player, right? It's the same thing that would have happened to Ilas Moriba. And so, would you put him in the stands or would you play him? Because I can't think that comes to the caveat that if Dembele is not renewing and reducing his salary now, that means that Ferran Torres will not be registered. And that means that, I mean, we're going to talk about Alvaro Morata next, but that means he probably wouldn't be registered either. And so that means that I think to get top four, you're going to have to play Dembele. And the top four and the ambitions of the club beyond this year, if you want Haaland, you have to finish top four. And if you then to finish top four, you either have to register Ferran Torres or you should probably play a talent like Dembele to finish top four. And it just, it's not going to be advantageous. And I know that kind of, it kind of spits in the face of, the hard line that the club would like to take on a player leaving on a free. And it feels like the player has won that battle. And I know people don't want Barca to take the L there, but the much, much larger L, like my care or belief is I want the club to be as good and sustainable and as high succeeding as it can be in the post Dembele era, even next year. And that means that if he's going to hold the club hostage, they're unfortunately going to have to be held hostage to play him to finish top four. Because it's weird, because it's like you're saying, is it Dembele or Haaland? I mean, but the answer is if it's not Dembele, then hopefully it can be Haaland. And it is even weird to think. It is even weird to think about Dembele though. I think this is the final point on Dembele, that because it's all theoretical, if you say who fits Xavi's system, Dembele or Haaland, and the way he wants to play, it feels like Dembele on paper is actually the player that fits Xavi's system better, and Haaland is a bigger question mark. But if you say who makes Barcelona better in the next 5 years, even if Dembele renewed, the answer is Haaland.
It's Haaland,
1,000 times every single day. It's of course Haaland makes the club better. He scores almost a goal a game at Borussia Dortmund for the last few seasons, and he's only
so
21.
Young, so smart, so powerful. I mean, he really is just one of these kind of total packages, And I mean, he is. I mean, not quite to the point, okay, so you don't maybe necessarily entirely overhaul the way you play for him, but you can't be dogmatic if you're a club that aspires to a certain style of play and Erling Haaland isn't, inch perfect, the number 9 or the man for your system, you have to give a little. Like the dogma has to crack a little bit to facilitate that. Now, you don't necessarily do that for every player, but I agree that Dembele is, in theory, the better fit for the way that Xavi wants to play. As far as, because I mean, if there is no other recourse, if there's no other way to free up the money and the squad spaces and everything to register Ferran Torres, then I mean, you might just have to. I mean, I would say play Dembele. I mean, he's never made any overtures about wanting. He hasn't claimed that he's going to shut it down and not try or tank games or anything like that. So there's no reason to believe that he's not going to be, a decent professional and play to the best of his ability and play out his contract. And I agree, because you need to get into the top 4. There is no Haaland without the top 4. Like, I mean, just the notion that Haaland would want to sign for, even if it is Barca, sort of the grand legacy and the all the prestige and everything. The notion that Erling Haaland's going to sign for a Europa League team is absurd. I mean, that sort of thing simply does not happen.
Well, if Barca are in the Europa League, not only is he not signing, but he's going to Real Madrid. I mean, that is the higher
Right.
there. Barca's trying to swoop in. I mean, and it said that it's not even that Laporta is desperate for Haaland, is that Laporta is desperate for Haaland and Mbappe to not go to Real Madrid. From a marketing perspective, it's just as important to get the name Haaland on the back of jerseys. It's just essential to Barca's brand. It's essential to the next wave or the next generation to have that player around all these other, in theory, future superstars. But to your point about what can be done, the immediate problem continues to be that Barca needs to reduce salary to register Torres and Dani Alves. And to get under the 97 million euro threshold, they're only able to use 25% on incoming transfers then. And that number is just so low. And what I've seen, the only possible thing they have left to play after PK reduced his salary very, very little. Dani Alves is basically coming for, as free as possible. But one of the solutions I saw that may upset people is that there could be, speaking of renewals, a renewal for Sergio Roberto, even injured now, that massively lowers his salary, but does keep him at the club for an extension of 2 years. So that's
fine, right?
Right. That's what I've seen, that they can pretty much, it means that they can register everybody who will actually play while he's still injured, and renew him for a much lower salary, because he does make a lot. I think, of the things that I trust, I think he's making the sixth most or something on the ledger, or fifth or sixth most. So, his salary is quite high.
Like that whole old guard, like all the guys that were, from the old guard apparently are on good money. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but he's well paid from what I can gather.
Yeah, and so that means you're stuck with Sergio Roberto. But again, I don't know if the club, especially the Catalans there, believe the same thing, that you're stuck with Sergio Roberto. And especially if you're going to be, as I spoke about on the earlier show this week, if Dest is indeed 1 foot out the door already, which I don't need to rehash it. It continues to puzzle me, but I understand how he is a financial asset, and the club is looking for what can get things done, what can bring in a Ferran Torres, and who has to be sacrificed for that.